For decades, Europe believed that war had left their continent. But the irony is, what could end Europe did not start in Europe. It started thousands of kilometers away. In the Middle East, a war in Iran, Gaza, and the Gulf may sound like a regional conflict, but in reality, it is simultaneously choking three vital arteries of Europe: energy, trade, and social stability. The Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, and the Suez Canal are becoming strategic choke points. When they are paralyzed, Europe not only loses its energy source, they lost their entire economic foundation. And the most frightening thing is that this is happening at Europe's weakest moment. A continent dependent on imported energy, politically divided, and caught in the midst of global power struggles. To the south is the Middle East war. To the east is the war in Ukraine. To the west is an America increasingly pursuing its own interests. And further afield, China is restructuring the global trade order, even though it is no longer a battlefield. But Europe could become the biggest victim of this war. And to understand why a war thousands of kilometers away from London or Berlin could shake the entire continent, we need to go back to the moment everything began. A day in late February 2026. On the 28th of February 2026, a large-scale military campaign began in the Middle East under the codename Operation Epic Fury. It is said to be a precision military operation targeting Tehran. But in reality, it seems to be a knife thrust straight into the throat of the world order we once knew. Hearing the news seems distant, like a story from somewhere else. But the Middle East has never been a different place. It is the crossroads of the world, where energy, trade, and geopolitics intersect like bare electrical wires. For that reason, perhaps, we have been too naive to believe that we could stand outside this game, because the position connecting Asia, Europe, and Africa causes every upheaval here to create a butterfly effect almost instantly. The explosions in Tehran seem to create shockwaves that spread faster than the speed of sound, hitting electronic boards in London and Frankfurt directly. And more importantly, in that crossroads of the Middle East, there exists a bottleneck so small that on the map it appears as just a thin line: the Strait of Hormuz. This is not an ordinary shipping route. About 20% of the world's oil and nearly a quarter of its LNG must pass through this place. As soon as that bottleneck tightens, the entire global energy system starts to gasp for breath, and the market reacted immediately. In just the first 48 hours of March 2026, over 6,000 international flights were cancelled as Middle Eastern airspace was closed. Brent crude oil prices jumped from around $72 to over $100 in just a few days. Gas in Europe also skyrocketed, from around 31 euros per MWh to nearly 100 euros. This figure is not just a matter for the exchanges. It goes straight into the kitchen. They go into heating bills, into the price of bread, on the morning bus. A war thousands of kilometers from London sometimes starts with very small things. A moment of hesitation before turning on the heater, or multiple instances of closing the wallet while standing in front of the supermarket shelves. It is worth mentioning that Europe does not seem to be the main character in this war, but it could be the place that feels the strongest aftershocks. And when a spark in the desert can shake the energy market of an entire continent, the strategic naivety that Europe has maintained for decades seems to be challenged by the harsh reality. We are too fragile to external shocks. Have we been too confident in the stability of a world that has always been so delicately interconnected? Have you ever wondered how a spark in a distant desert could extinguish the candle in your own room? But the disruption doesn't stop at flights or stock prices. There is something even more terrifying being silently suffocated. That is the vital lifeblood, the one that sustains warmth and light for the entire continent: energy. We once had a golden age, where cheap and abundant energy was as obvious as the air we breathe. After 2022, when Europe declared its abandonment of Russian gas, politicians raised their glasses to toast independence. But perhaps it was just a sleight of hand changing the shackles. We joyfully escaped the Eastern vice, only to willingly place our necks into another vice in the south: LNG from the Middle East. The energy independence we have long rejoiced in now appears as a castle on sand before the tidal wave of the 2026 war. Look at the Strait of Hormuz. On the map, it is just a narrow strip of water, but it is the heartbeat of the world. When 20% of the world's oil and 25% of LNG pass through a throat being choked by drones and missiles, the peace in your home becomes a luxury. Only in the first week of March 2026, maritime traffic through here decreased by up to 70%. The gigantic ships of the energy corporations seem to have turned into moving targets in a life-and-death game. The most bitter is Qatar, the savior in whom Europe once placed its full trust. When the massive Ras Laffan gas complex was forced to halt production due to the risk of warfare, the entire security strategy of the UK, Italy, or Poland seemed to vanish into thin air. On the 3rd of March 2026, TTF gas prices in the EU skyrocketed by 200%, reaching €100 MWh. Let me remind you, before this war, that number was just over €31. Gas reserves in the Netherlands seem to be down to only 10.7%, a figure enough to make any energy expert shudder. What is the irony here? We have spent decades debating the green future, but now we don't even have enough black future to heat the present. The system seems to operate in such a way that we have enough plans for the next century, except for how to keep Germany's chemical and steel plants from shutting down next week. The European locomotive suddenly seems as fragile as a dry twig before the fire of the Middle East. The era of cheap energy, the foundation upon which our prosperity and even our pensions were built, may have truly receded into the past. In a harsh reality, will we choose to heat our homes or maintain the last factories to preserve jobs for the next generation? Is the self-sufficiency we hear about every day a genius strategy, or just an illusion painted by those who have never had to worry about the electricity bill? Don't hesitate to leave your opinion. We need more straightforward perspectives on this reality. And subscribe to the channel to join us in uncovering the next layers of truth. Because when the energy runs out, all the wheels start to stop. The nervous system of global trade is on the brink of a massive stroke. If we consider the global economy as a living organism, then the Middle East is home to its two most important lungs, Hormuz and Suez. And dear sir, in the spring of 2026, both of those lungs seem to be stopping breathing. When the Red Sea blazed with fire and bullets, the logistics network connecting Asia and Europe was not just disrupted, it was torn apart. Transport giants like Maersk or Hapag-Lloyd seem to have run out of patience with betting the lives of their crew. They chose a solution from the last century, sailing around the Cape of Good Hope. A decision that sounds adventurous, but in reality, it is an economic disaster. The journey extended by 20 days is not just a simple delay. It is a direct blow to the wallets of every European family. We used to take pride in the just-in-time production model, where everything was optimized down to the second. But now, that pride seems to be crumbling. A car in Munich cannot be shipped because it lacks a chip from Taiwan or a component from India that is floating somewhere in the Atlantic. Container shipping rates to the Mediterranean skyrocketed by 79% within just a few weeks in March 2026. Insurance companies seem to have pushed war risk premiums to extreme levels, turning cargo shipping into a luxury game. We once believed that the world was flat and borders were just lines on a map. But in reality, the borders of prosperity lie in the narrow bottlenecks that we do not control. Perhaps the free trade system we have built over the past half-century is actually a gigantic Achilles heel. Don't be surprised if you see empty spaces on supermarket shelves in London or Paris. From electronic components to the shoes you wear, everything is quietly increasing in price with each beat of the war. The world trade map is being redrawn in the most painful way for European consumers. Slower, more expensive, and more uncertain. A world too dependent on the precision of every moment of transport. How many days of disruption can it endure? Are you willing to pay double for everyday necessities just to maintain the living standards we have come to consider as default? And the shortage of goods and inflation are just the surface layer. The more terrifying thing is happening deep within society, where cracks begin to explode as the bonds between people are put under the pressure of survival. There is a bitter truth. The wars in the Middle East seem never to stop at its geographical borders. They always find a way to spill into every street, every square, and even every dining table of the European people. When the explosions resonate in Tehran or Beirut, their aftershocks not only shake the stock exchanges, but also tear apart the social fractures that have long smoldered within the heart of the old continent. In France, Germany, or Sweden, the polarization between communities seems to directly threaten what we still call order and peace. And, dear sir, the specter of refugee crisis too is returning, more real and terrifying than ever. With an estimated 3.9 million people displaced due to unrest in Iran and Lebanon alone in 2026, Europe is facing a massive wave of migration. While national budgets are being depleted due to energy bills and military expenses, what will countries like Germany or Italy use to maintain social welfare? The fatigue from the economic recession is the fertile ground for the rise of extremist voices. When farmers, the ones who feed this continent, have to take to the streets to protest due to skyrocketing fertilizer and fuel prices, that is when the system is sending out a red alert signal. Not only did the protests take to the streets, but this battle also infiltrated the digital space. According to CloudSec, immediately after the airstrikes on Iran, a series of ransomware attacks from groups like Hydra C2 have directly targeted our aviation systems and banking infrastructure, a form of silent retaliation, but with devastating power against a society completely dependent on technology. It seems that the tolerance, once the pride of Europeans, is reaching its breaking point. The Schengen Agreement, a symbol of a borderless Europe, may soon be just a memory, as countries begin to erect barriers again to stop the flow of refugees and the fear of terrorism. Can a house stand firm when its members start turning their backs on each other due to differing opinions? Are we truly defending the value of freedom, or are we simply building new walls out of fear? This reality may be very hard to accept, but we need to face it head on. Don't forget to subscribe so we can continue to uncover these truths together in the most neutral way possible. Because right now, Europe is not only facing street riots. This continent seems to be caught between the two pincers of fire of superpowers, where strategic autonomy has become a distant dream. Look at the map of Europe in 2026. In the east, the fire in Ukraine has not yet subsided. In the south, the Middle East is ablaze. And in the west, our greatest ally seems to be preoccupied with its own calculations under the banner of America First. Europe appears as a fragile oasis besieged by whirlpools of fire. Perhaps we are waking up from a long sleep to realize that the security umbrella we have always trusted is no longer being raised for our benefit. Washington's launch of a military campaign in Iran without any thorough consultation seems to have completely left Brussels or London in a passive position. We are not only caught between wars, but also caught between superpowers. While we are engrossed in discussing green transition and lofty humanitarian values, the real world forces us to choose between bombs and butter. Will you choose social welfare, healthcare, pensions, or new weapons depots? The Rearm Europe rearmament program is turning civilian factories into war workshops. Even the Northwood Declaration, the new Anglo-French nuclear axis, reveals a stark truth. We are trying to build our own umbrella because we no longer trust NATO. But what is the price of this autonomy? The U.S. government seems to have issued an ultimatum demanding that members increase defense spending to 5% of GDP. It's not just a number on paper. It's a direct sacrifice of resources that should have been allocated to your life. Meanwhile, the European Central Bank, ECB, is facing an impossible situation. They have to raise interest rates to save the euro, which is depreciating against the USD. But that very action is suffocating small and medium-sized enterprises that are already gasping for breath due to energy bills. Investors seem to be quietly pulling out their capital, seeking refuge in the US or Asia, leaving a lonely Europe with a pile of public debt and empty promises. Strategic autonomy is no longer a catchy slogan in summit meetings. It is an urgent survival demand, a cry for help from a continent struggling to find its place in a brutally multipolar world order. A continent that was once the cradle of social welfare. Can it survive if it has to turn every factory into a weapons depot? Are we truly seeking autonomy? Or are we simply becoming more isolated in a world without rules? We often think that history ends with a loud bang, but in reality, it often ends with the sigh of those who realize the old world has slipped through their fingers. The European dream, a society of tolerance, prosperity, and peace, seems to be crumbling right before our eyes in the spring of 2026. The economic model that was once our pride, built on cheap energy and free trade, is now facing a brutal wave of deindustrialization. In Germany, the smokestacks of chemical and steel factories have begun to fade. With energy costs 3 to 4 times higher than global competitors, the locomotive of the continent seems to no longer have the strength to pull the entire train forward. But for you, the impact might not be the sound of bombs from the Middle East, but the quiet erosion of quality of life. The stagflation is forcing many families to face harsh choices: a nutritious meal or a warm room. On the afternoon of the 4th of March 2026, gasoline prices in rural areas reached the outrageous level of €4.20. Liter. In just 1 week, the price of 1 kilogram of chicken breast skyrocketed from €9 to nearly €20. These numbers do not lie. They are robbing us of our peace of mind in old age. Things that were once taken for granted, like fresh produce from Asia or the Middle East, have suddenly become luxury items. Supermarket shelves have begun implementing shopping quotas, a sight that perhaps our generation has only seen in black and white films about the post-war era. Meanwhile, trust in the political system seems to have eroded to the bare minimum. A new lost generation is forming right in the heart of the wealthiest nations. These are young people with weary souls from anxiety, who look at the cost of raising children and the state of the world and wonder, is bringing a child into this world a crime? Europe is entering a new era of scarcity and persistent instability. The 2026 war seems to be the end of our strategic naivety. But, dear sir, sometimes the collapse of old illusions is a necessary condition for a more self-reliant and resilient continent to be reborn from the ashes. We are standing watching the sunset descend upon the symbols of an old era. The question is no longer when everything will return to the way it was, but what we will build on this rubble. When the old standards of living collapse, how will we redefine happiness and safety? Can Europe be reborn, or is this truly the final chapter of a legend that has grown weary? Thank you for accompanying us to the very last moments of this journey. The answers for the future are still waiting to be written by our awareness today, because the new chapter of Europe has only just begun. We have just embarked together on a haunting journey into a not-so-distant future, where the fires in the Middle East are silently reshaping the destiny of an entire old continent. Europe, in the silence of ancient palaces, seems to be learning to accept a harsh reality, that prosperity is not eternal, and security has never been a free gift. The war of 2026 may mark the end of an era of naivety, but it also serves as the beginning of a more self-reliant, pragmatic, and resilient version of Europe. The new chapter of history is still waiting to be written, not by politicians in closed meetings, but by the awareness of each of us starting today. In a world that is fracturing, will we choose to cling to old values until they collapse, or be ready to abandon comfort to build a stronger foundation? Do you believe that Europe will rise powerfully from the ashes, or is this truly the final chapter of a legend that has grown too weary? Please leave your opinion in the comments. I would love to hear your candid perspective. If you feel the weight of these changes, please like and share the video to spread the message. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next in-depth investigations about a world order undergoing intense changes. Your support is the motivation for us to continue uncovering the most raw truths. The content of this video is based on hypothetical scenarios and geopolitical analysis for reference purposes only, and is not intended to target any individual or organization. We focus on analyzing systems and social phenomena, to stimulate multidimensional thinking. Viewers need to be selective and take responsibility for their personal opinions. All forecast data serve the purpose of building scenario documents and are not financial or political advice.